Okay, going to go over, I'm going to be checking all this code in here, pushing it out to the latest branch. Made a lot of changes today and some hopefully all improvements. So we've changed the default app schema file. We've just added this block at the top that gets included in a lot of schema files. And this is if you want to, like some environments, you want to, when you drop your tables every time because you're doing a lot of schema changes and things like that, you kind of want to start from scratch. And so we have this app dev drop tables flag. I don't like the name of it, but because it's probably going to be used more broadly than just tables. But for now, that's it. And you'll see like drop table statements in here on projects when I'm talking about specific projects. With ArcSQL, we've added an assert string as key string. So this throws an error if the string has any space. It's only allowed numbers, letters, uppercase or lowercase, underscores, and dashes. So sometimes in programs we need to provide a key, a user-generated key. And but we don't want any of these funky characters, so this allows us to basically provide an assertion in the procedures. And you see that there. We're using a regular expression, so added documentation to that. Yeah, okay. Moving on, alert package header. Changed pre-priority group key to alert priority group key. I talked about that in the last video. Just as I was writing my tests and working on chart density, I just noticed some of the naming was inconsistent. So we're going with longer names. They're clearer. They're not as pretty, but alert schema. Alert schema. Okay, so here we're actually checking, validating this key at the table level. So unfortunately, you can't create a check constraint that runs a function or procedure. You should be able to. You can't create a subtype of a data type that does like a regex and stuff. That would be cool. So I want to do as much on version 1. We want to do as much validation at the table level as possible. So instead of having in our procedures checking for if this key was provided correctly or if a null value was passed in, and let's just enforce it at the table and let the ugly errors come up. And then once you get working with the UI, you can start to make more meaningful errors and capture these errors higher up and provide something a little bit more user-friendly. But for now, we've added triggers, so you'll see a lot of the things in here require a user key, a key to get created, and that's provided by you, and this just does some validation on it. So you're going to see that probably through here as I've deployed it in a few places. Added some debug. Okay, contact group. Yeah, just renames, a lot of renames here. Are adding more info to the name. As I was writing my testing for chart density, I needed these get contact rows just to see if the rows existed, and then it also gives you access to those keys that you need for your tests. So this is a good example of when you might want to return an entire row from a table, and so I've been doing this more and more. I like to just grab the row, modify it, and then sometimes I'll have a save row procedure, which just saves the row back to the table. And these are overloaded, so there's like 2 ways of calling the same exact function. It's not technically the same function, but one would be to pass in the ID and one would be the key. The key is the thing that you're going to know. You're probably not going to know the ID, although you can get access to it. But the key is the thing that you're generating. When you create a contact for your application, you're generating your own key for that. Contact schema. We added those triggers to validate that the key, the contact group key and contact key are key strings. To K2 install, we're creating a package called K2 test, which is just like you'll see when I write tests that I'll show you when we get down here, but it's just a little helper for writing tests. Metrics, renames. I'm going to have renames. I don't think I did anything outside of renames here. These are all yeah, just adding stat bucket key instead of bucket key. It really wasn't technically right. So that's all we did with stat package. Stat schema, we're checking for the key string again on bucket key, and this, oh yeah, this needs to change. So I'm going to go ahead and check all this in, but those are going to change to stat bucket key because it ought to be that way. So that's a to-do. Okay, K2 tests. So I kind of ripped some stuff out because I actually was running some tests, and this is no longer to run tests. This is like a helper. And you have this package called K2 test with a setup procedure, and the setup procedure is basically deleting everything from your Arc SQL log. It's checking to see if your app test user and app config exist. If not, it's deleted. If it does, it deletes it, and then it does an add account. So it goes through the add account process, which will fire your workflow for adding an account, which in like chart density, if you're following that at all, I do a bunch of stuff. When an account gets created, I need to create a bunch of other things, and there's a way to hook into that using a procedure. That's pretty easy and standard here for K2. So here's test results. I put this little, and so I add that to my test files basically. Maybe I'll show you one as soon as, let's just go look at one right now. Just, uh-oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. Yeah, okay, we won't do that. Where are we at? Token, what did we do with token? Added some overloaded get token rows for doing our tests. Oh, added expires now, so you can create a token that expires. And tokens are just, something you're going to use a lot. So I've got basically a token service here. You can add an expiration time in minutes to it, and you can assign tokens to users or whatever you want, and you can use them how you want to use them. I've got two ways to get these. DBMS Crypto Random Bytes 32 is what I'm using now. I think that's better than sys GUI ID, or GUID, but I don't know. And yeah, so we updated assert valid token to actually check the expire time if it exists. If it doesn't exist, nothing changes there. So we've got P expires in minutes. When you create a token, you pass in your token key, which is, again, the thing you're using to identify tokens. You should keep track of that in your app. Usually they're derived like from the user or from the user object plus an ID, and then you can in your code very easily refer to the tokens if you want to. And then you pass in a user ID, and I've said this before, but you use like basically a system user if you don't have a real user ID. If the token doesn't say belong to a specific user, then you would pass in a system user, and K2 installs a system user called K2. You can look in the SAS auth table and you'll see that, and there's ways to get the ID there and use that in your code. So our token schema, yeah, we moving things to 252. Basically, I'm trying to reduce the number of data types and sizes. So trying to standardize. So 255. I think there's some things in Oracle that are 255, and so I thought, well, instead of having those, I'll just use 255. So cleaning up that as I go. I tend to just go much larger than I'll need, and worry about that down the road if there's ever a actual performance issue. That would be a good problem to have. And final, token test. So here's a good example, actually, token test. So we're executing K2 test setup, which deletes the log table, creates our user fresh. And then I've written a bunch of token tests now, or not a bunch, a few here. So you can see how I've written some tests. And then at the end, we run K2 test result. Now, if you're running from your app directory, it's got to be like .. /lib/K2 test result, but that works. So those are all the changes that are going in, and more to come. And I will push this right now. Thanks.